And welcome back to V-Road, CCTCG's weekly Vanguard podcast. I'm Cole.
And I'm Trey.
And it's been a long time since we've said that. We took a bit of a break for the holidays, but with our first episode of the new year, it felt apt to kind of talk about how we felt about 2024 for Vanguard, as well as like kind of what we're going into, especially with all the spicy new things coming up in set 7. There's like a lot of hype around that, at least for me, and especially with the anime too.
Yeah, it's we're happy to be back. It's 2025 now, which is weird. The time flew so fast from 2024. I mean, gosh, we started this YouTube channel for really just kind of the heck of it, to kind of have the good discussions like that we would at our card shop. But now we kind of hold off on things. Like we've been, gone a couple weeks since we've seen some of the stuff releases for set 7, and Cole and I very specifically not talked about any of the new releases, so we can kind of get on here and discuss it, and kind of show what our thought process is about everything. So, it's good to be back. We wish everyone had a happy New Year and happy holidays, and got to spend some good time with their families. But yes, we're back, and Vanguard's back, and the shops are back open, and we're very excited to be here.
Yeah, we had a bit of some crazy weather this week, but luckily it died down enough for us to get back to our locals today that we just came back from.
Yeah.
We're
at 75 subscribers, so we're very excited for that. Thank you all.
Oh yeah,
very much for that.
That's
75 is huge for us. So
yeah, we're almost to triple digits, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, I guess we'll get into it. 2024 was a very strange year, but I think it was probably the best year for the game since Overdress started. And that's kind of a big thing to say, because Overdress, the beginning of it, was such a big deal with like MSRP $4 starter decks and like a new format that was like kind of built from the ground up, as opposed to like what V did, where it just kind of iterated on what works in older Vanguard and took away what didn't. But I think it is very strong. It's a very strong year for a lot of reasons, and we'll get through all of them. But the first one is easily Triple Drive. I think it's probably one of the best reprint sets we've ever gotten for Standard. Not so much as far as like reprinting generic cards or anything like that, though there were some that were nice to see in there, but it was mostly just to give a really good jumping on point for new players. The amount of decks that got stuff reprinted in them that made them extremely cheap for how strong they still were at the time. You can build some of those decks now, and they're gonna be fairly relevant going into even 2025.
Yeah, Triple Drive, it almost feels like set 6 is now just another Triple Drive that almost feels like a little bit of a cop-out in a sense. They are updating some decks, so it is a very big difference. And there's only a couple like big reprints, like the grade 4 assisting cards where you ditch them and you draw a card if you're going to a grade 4, or you have a grade 4 Vanguard, which is really needed because those generics are pretty expensive. So that's a really big one. But Triple Drive in its own right, only introducing 2 new sets, and then everything else in the set other than some rarities were reprints. Very very important for the game, and like you said, a great jumping on port, especially for all of the glitter decks. I know from the Triple Drive set specifically, I built 5 out of the 6 glitter decks in Triple Drive because I didn't have the decks before then. I had always wanted them, just didn't think it was the right time to pick them up, and some of them were kind of ridiculously priced for what they were. But even for me, for what it was a perfect jumping on spot. And for people who are just getting into the game, yeah, that was like the time to do it. Boxes were fairly cheap, and because of the reprint, everything went down in price on those cards. There were a couple supporting cards for some of the decks, like Thegria's alternate, the one I'm blanking on right now. It kind of went up in price like the week after Triple Drive came out, because people are realizing, oh yeah, Thegria's cheap to build, it's easy to play, but that card hadn't been reprinted itself, so it kind of went up in price. But for the most part, it's always been at a very good rate with those cards. I mean, I still have stockpiles of cards from that set that I use in every deck currently. So very much happy with what they did and approached that with.
Yeah, and then that, well, obviously, so before that was the last lyrical set for Overdress. And that one, that one was very relevant for the fact that, Labrador came out in that, Pacifica, not that big of a deal. But there were quite a few decks in there that you could still kind of see pop up here and there. Obviously, people don't play them much nowadays just because Divines as a set, or like Divines, like the set of bosses that they are so popular because the anime did so well that they're just not, you're not seeing most things that aren't Divines decks nowadays, which I think is worth talking about at some point. But for now, at least, I think it was kind of refreshing to finally get away from Virina and Drajuld and Leonore and like decks like those, which I still love all those decks, like the concepts behind them and how they play, but it felt really cool to finally get into once per game abilities.
Yeah, it left a stain, and I've said it before on this channel that I was very anxious coming into Divines because Vanguard's always been a love of mine, and it's been fantastic for everything it was. But we are in the 4th iteration of the game if you include the mobile version. I won't even include the Switch games because those are kind of a sidebar to what we have here. But I was very anxious with the power scaling that would be coming from once per turn skills, because they had to be good enough to the point to make it worth a once only activation type thing. So very, very impressed, I have to say, so far with what Bushiroad has done with those. And I think they implemented it well and have continued to do that in some of the showings that they've come for some of the sets upcoming, and all through set 5 that is currently released out. So yeah, interesting move on their part, but it executed well.
Yeah, I think the biggest hit for me for 2024 as far as sets go was definitely Fated Clash. Like besides Triple Drive, obviously, because you got 10 new, you got at least like 6 new really strong decks, just kind of out the gate, and a lot of nice generic cards that can go in any deck, especially decks that came before Divines. They get more mileage out of energy cyclers, arguably, because they don't use it at all. Obviously, there actually wasn't really a ton of decks that use energy even in the new Fated ones, but then they slowly got cards over time that had them use energy, so it kind of metered out how much of them you were running in these super popular decks. But like, their price point aside, that is the one thing you can hold against them. But I think, as we'll come to make a pattern of, as we mentioned, more generics, because they were definitely not the only generics they made. Those and the ones from 2023 just need to be reprinted in general. We've said it before, but we'll say it every time it needs to be brought up, I think, is what that can tie into kind of my little wish list for 2025 that we'll put near the end. But for now, obviously, yeah, as we see it right now going into 2025, those generic energy cyclers are extremely expensive, and they're not really worth what they are at this point. As much as I do think you do need them, the one saving grace is that they are kind of deck dependent. Not every deck is going to use them, so there's that at least.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a discussion earlier at the card shop about this. There was more of one of our friends had kind of discussed it, but we were kind of talking about like the necessity of using all the energy cyclers in the different decks, and we kind of talked about how not every deck needs them, in the sense that currently the 2 main Divines decks, Zorga and Levidros for Stoicheia, don't touch that energy cycler at all. Like, there's no space in the deck for them. They are not useful enough to be in there. So you kind of pick and choose your battles with what decks you put them into, and the price point, is it worth it to you in that instance? So more of your common decks like Rezael, Varga, those kinds of things absolutely run them. Welstra doesn't, like, currently at least. So there's a lot of things you can kind of balance with that. But yes, Bushy set the precedent with a huge reprint set in the middle of the year last year for Triple Drive. I think they need to keep that up and do a similar thing yearly. Say, okay, hey, we released a bunch of generics last year. Here's a reprint set. Anyone who didn't have a chance to pick them up or the price has been too outrageous for them, here's a chance to grab it now. Which, like I said, set 6, they're kind of doing that in a sense. They're only doing a couple of them where, Noctriso and some of those cards are being reprinted, which is absolutely massive with the 2 new Stride decks coming out, as well as like Marstogi and Noctriso going to be useful in Jet and Messiah. And I can't remember the name of the Keter one, but I mean, there's a lot of things like that are going to be, cheaper because of it. Because as soon as Night Rose and Pari got announced, the and Golvi or however you say it, like Stoichea one and the Dark States one just shot up in price because, well, it's a Stride deck, it's a grade 4 deck, you're gonna want to use them. So it's really nice that they're doing that for us, but it doesn't feel like it's the full Triple Drive. So I think they need to stick with their precedent and bear down with it and continue to do that yearly.
Yeah, I hope that at least going into 2025, that the idea of reprinting older triple rares as, in sets at the triple rare rarity, not the reprint rarity that is a lot scarcer to have. You're pulling like maybe 1 or 2 a case, which is just not gonna cut it, honestly. When they're at the triple rare rarity, and I think you can even pull like silver rares of them and stuff, which is really nice. But that actually keeps the price of the cards down enough where it's worth reprinting them in the first place. So I hope that isn't delegated solely to these glitter sets, which I'm not even sure how many of those we're gonna have. It seems like every single time a glitter set comes out, it's the last one. But I like how it feels, because this last one, only Roa got something notable, and the rest of them got like an order, and that's fine. But I just wonder if we're gonna go into like a new web novel where we're gonna get new glitter units. We're gonna have more Dual Nation cards, which also need a reprint, even though they just came out. But I will say that Festival Booster this year was a pretty exciting set to have in the game, because the new Regalis piece that was put in there, as well as the new over triggers, did add a little bit more spice to what was already going on, with people getting used to the new mechanic of energy and all these new Divines decks that were seeing more play than most other decks. Like it did add a nice bit of a variety to having a Regalis piece that can be like a Pot of Greed, or can help you countercharge in any deck, or the creative, I'll say, abilities of the purple and yellow OT, which aren't bad, but it seems to be that as time has gone on, more people have just kind of gone back to blue or red, which is fine. I think there are cases to be made for those OTs, but they're definitely, I wouldn't say niche, but they're not as like all-encompassing. It's kind of hard to beat a crit, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of like the people are playing with what they're comfortable with, and they know, like, you've been playing around being able to get an extra crit and a card back from drop for so long, as well as having a restanding, rear guard, or calling a rear guard and having attack. Like, there's so many things that they did kind of right with blue and red OTs, that when they introduced the purple and yellow, they're still really good and still ran in decks. And honestly, we'll probably see more with some of the upcoming stuff, hopefully. But currently, they're a little on the back burner. But nice to have as like I want to throw it in this deck type thing. So
yeah, as well as the Dual Nation cards, which I think was nice to see, and I hope they do more of them. But when they do these, they write a really fine line when they put stuff like these in reprint sets, because people are pulling those cards, but you're not pulling the same amount of cards as you would in like a regular main set. So as much as these cards are cool and I like having them in the game, I don't enjoy the price point they're at, in that not really all of them, they are more generic than the generic cards we've been getting, in that you can play them in two different nations, and they do kind of something relevant in both nations, giving something that one nation doesn't have to it, to let it kind of play around with. The best example being the Keter and Stoicheia one, letting a Stoicheia deck do some scrying and stuff like that is pretty cute, and I like the idea of it. But I would like to see some dual nation cards of the combinations we haven't had yet. Like, there is no Dragon Empire Brancade. There is no Keter Dark States. Like, there's no stuff like that, which I think would be really cool to see how they would do that. Since I think we've seen quite a bit of this current combination of them already, given the glitter bosses and these new generic cards are the exact same combination of nations. So I kind of want to see if they branch out for next year's festival collection, and I'm kind of eager to see what that brings. I hope they kind of do something like Triple Drive, where they're reprinting relevant stuff and then Festival Booster, and just kind of consolidating them into one really powerful reprint set. Because I don't think it would be hard to do. You just need to avoid like reprinting Inlet Pulse as a rarity reprint instead of a reprint rarity, instead of like an actual, like, just print it at like start down downsizing or like downgrading rarities on these, please. I think all the other card games that do it so well, and it does so much for their game, and it keeps the expensive ones expensive if people want that triple rare foiling on their cards. But if Inlet Pulse was like a double rare, if the set 11 order grade 2s were put at like double rare, that would be so huge. Like, I think that would do so much for the health of the game, because the longer the game goes on, the more these cards are just they're going to stay up. They're never going to go down, in my opinion, unless we just see a bunch of new decks that are crazy but never use them. So now they're going to be like 15 because they're still good but nobody plays them, instead of, the $80 or $60 or whatever Teeth Fault's at now.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be decks that are locked to their specific things and needs that won't continue to run them just because they don't need them. Like, Undercover is one that comes to mind. You pretty much run everything that says Undercover, and you don't run a whole lot of other generics because you need that specific key tag. Dolls, you kind of do the same. Yes, for a while there in set 1 or set 2 when it came out. No, 1, whatever it was. Either way, you ran both iterations of the cyclers, the Soul Blast cyclers and energy cyclers. Like, it all was ran, and now you kind of drop it down and the numbers kind of balance funny. But with the new promo doll and some dolls from set 4 and 5, the stuff gets balanced around. So, there's going to be decks that don't care about it. But for the most part, they really don't have a downside to run most of the time. Like, if you're running them, you are running them for their pluses. So, I mean, for the energy cyclers, it's because you draw a card and you can discard it and draw a card, or you can do something with them specifically, like call a card back, or search the deck, top 3 of the deck, all sorts of good pluses that the nations just kind of generically want to do. So really no negatives in a lot of those cards.
Yeah.
Always gonna be prevalent.
I go back and forth with this with a buddy of ours at locals, but it's cards like those and cards like the dog Sergown and versions of it like Shenri and the Stoicheia one coming out relatively soon. I'm not sure when really, but cards like those, there is the argument that like Sergown is the most egregious one, like it is probably the easiest to use. But I think in all regards, these are cards that almost any deck can use, and it was something to be said about how energy as a mechanic being added to the game, the idea of energy blasting 7 to draw a card helped every deck in the game. Those decks that were off by 1 card and they just needed to find that one piece, or they were off by 5k when they were guarding and they just needed that 1 card, or earlier in the turn to live, or these decks that aren't bad at all, but they just struggle with their hand size just enough that having that option to draw kept them in the game when they normally wouldn't be, and kept them relevant, which is good. We want more and more decks to be at least a fighting chance with some of the top decks. So to me, when I look at a card like Saragon and the energy cyclers and stuff, as long as those cards are accessible enough for most players to get, I don't care how powerful they are. Like, in my opinion, like, they've already been printed. There's no reason to make those cards and then ban them later. There's no reason to, like, pretend that they shouldn't, like, their level of consistency and plussing just shouldn't be in the game. Like, that doesn't help where we know the game can be at. Like, those cards like Saragon, yes, if you drop like 3 on your turn 1 and you have something that they can boost as well, yeah, you're digging through your deck really quickly and stuff like that. But that's not the end all be all of a deck. There are so many decks I've played where drawing a lot of cards doesn't mean anything. It means you can guard a lot, but if you don't kill your opponent and they can keep up with your hand just as well as you keep up with theirs, then it doesn't mean anything to draw as much as you are. So I don't think Saragon inherently is a card that needs to be addressed in any way other than it just shouldn't be a box topper. Like, what?
Yeah. And that's kind of a segue I want to lead into with things that I think Vanguard / Bushiroad did wrong in the year of 2024. The biggest thing and the craziest thing, which makes zero sense, and it's not just in the US or any of the EN printings, they stopped adding in box toppers. Like, yes, there are something to be said that you're buying the case for what comes in the things. But at the same time, a lot of those times we were getting reprints of things. Like Security Upgrader is a big one that I know, like when Grade 4 Prison was like coming out and we got all of that reprints from Triple Drive. Like, we were able to build the deck a lot easier, but we still had one really expensive piece that was tough to get. It was like a 4 of, you had to have it because at the time you needed to get to Grade 4 no matter what. And Security Upgrader was your out. So as a box topper, it was great. And that's kind of what they should be doing for most reprints in reality. Is, yes, having a whole reprint set dedicated is fantastic, but at the same time, over time, introducing reprints as things as box toppers, or introducing promos, because not everyone has the ability to get out to locals. So adding in some sort of promo card as a box topper is great. Have it as a 4 of in a case, or 3, 5 of whatever. Something accessible to get them still out to the public and out there, and just adding a little more to what we're getting. The cases are great. None of the cards and decks really have been all that crazy expensive. So adding something a little more to it to add to the worth of purchasing a box or a case or things like that would be a big plus.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about it, but I do miss the days of, having a set come out and you'll see like the list of what the box toppers are, and you'd see like that one card and be like, oh, finally, that's getting reprinted. And it was actually a fairly meaningful reprint. Like that, a Security Upgrader, that the one you mentioned, like before it got reprinted, and I think it was like a box topper for set 11. That card was like $15 or $10 or something like that, which, in the grand scheme of things, wasn't the craziest price point. But when you have to afford other things to go along with your deck, it can pile up pretty quickly. So when that card got reprinted as a box topper in set 11, that card went down to like $1. It was insane. I've never seen a card tank that bad ever. And while I don't think that the same will be true if they reprint, like Cadwalla as a box topper, which I think it would be a very good box topper. I think there's a weird line you can ride where being like, oh, you should have energy cyclers as, box topper or something. I don't think that would ever make sense. I don't think you'd ever take like a triple rare and turn it into like basically a promo rarity at that point. It just wouldn't work. I think it worked very well with something like Triple Drive. But at the very least, like if we could think about how if the rest of 2024 after set 1 came out that Saragon was the box topper of, if every single set afterward had that exact same promo pack in it, like it would have been so nice. Like it would have been the best the game would have ever felt. Like you would have still had expensive energy cyclers and you'd have like your teeth vaults and stuff, but I don't remember if Shenri and Saragon were in the same promo pack. I feel like Shenri was a triple drive box topper or something along those lines. Yeah. But and wait, did Saragon come out in triple, like in that same promo pack, or did he come out in set 1?
He came out in set 1, I'm pretty sure.
Right, because I remember the reprint of set 1 didn't have box toppers, which
is crazy.
It's crazy. Like you can't make that up. Like if they just had, because they've done this before. They have copy and pasted the exact same box toppers between sets before. I've seen it. I can't remember the exact ones, but I know they exist. And if they had just done that for all of Divines, the exact same promo pack, we would have been swimming in like the amount of dogs. I don't know. Like, and that you did kind of remind me of something that is a plus about Divines that I know you're touching on negatives, but I guess we're kind of backing. We're going back and forth.
It's a little back and forth, but that's one of the big negatives.
That is a big negative. However, that does kind of bounce onto the positive, where generic cards in the format right now are very expensive, and they're a very big. It's kind of like other card games, where once you get those generic cards that you know will work in any deck of the nation you enjoy the most, you'll be fine. You won't have to spend that kind of money ever again, and that's a good thing, because those other cards you need to buy for a new deck, like your Rezel Vitas, your Vargas, your Varga Rakshasas, you know, like your Liel Amortas or Odiums, like your boss units and your relevant support cards, those are actually fairly cheap. Like there's going to be like, you know, like your Nilbarris that's going to shoot up a little bit, and then he'll go down once people start like filling out like deck builds, and some decks are running him, some decks aren't. Most are, but you know, probably not the best example, but you know, maybe him, like, and the grade 1 in Varga that shuts off intercepts. Like, those cards are going to be expensive for what they are, but I feel like because of how expensive generic cards are, the sets that they're from, they kind of push down everything else, because that's what people are trying to pull, because that's what they need for their decks, or they're just buying those cards, and the other ones are just kind of sitting. So if you're trying to build a Divines deck without the generic cards, regardless of what deck it is, you're going to probably hit sub 100, and that's a fine place to be in, especially if you just want to try the deck, and then you'll be like, okay, now I can do like generic cards and throw these in and see how that works. Because I know as far as set 5 goes, the deck actually, or that set actually isn't too expensive, which is nice.
Yeah, and that's been kind of a plus across Divines for the most part. Yes, there's a lot of hype early on some of the things. Like, obviously, if you're trying to buy cards around pre-release time, things are going to be up there because people are like, hey, it's a scarcity until the next week. And like one of our buddies, Brett, he likes to build decks, like whatever the main deck he's going to build in a set, he likes to have it done on pre-release weekend. Like, that's what he likes to do, because he wants to practice it for the week. And then when the next week's tournament comes out, he kind of has 2 weeks worth of practice in a sense, before getting to the locals and tournaments and things. So every person can approach things differently, but after a little bit of time, like a week or two after a case is open, those prices kind of settle and everything is fairly cheap. Like, Impaldio is a very, very good deck right now. And if you're not throwing in generics, like if you're not throwing in the energy cyclers, I mean, even shoot, you can throw Bulb Mines in. Bulb Mines aren't that all bad right now. And the deck is just good. And you can get that probably sub $60 and play it.
Bulb Mine's in a weird spot right now, actually. It's like at like 13, 15, which is kind of bizarre. They can never reprint that card enough. Yeah.
Around there.
Yeah, they can never reprint that card enough, but
even then, there are plenty enough outside of that, like there's a grade 1 that literally just says like if you have 2 auto mod gauges or 3 auto mod gauges or something, it's like 10k power. It's just an 18k booster.
Yeah.
Like there are plenty of commons and stuff for the deck that are just fine in their own right to do that. So yes, absolutely, Divines have been doing great for the most part of keeping things at a very manageable pricing level that everyone can play it.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed on the Facebook group where I see a lot of people buying and selling. The thing I'm seeing more nowadays is people are moving generic cards less, and people are moving cores more. You know, I see people selling like Leo Odium cores and Rezel cores and Varga cores, but they're not ever moving their generic cards because they're still playing that nation. They're probably gearing up for something coming out later. Like they're pretty hyped about like the new season of the anime, and they want to build a deck out of set 7. But as far as, you know, cards for a deck that is encapsulated by just cards that are meant for that deck, they're not the worst right now, and I don't think they will be for a while. I think probably one of the other really good things about Divines is they injected a lot of very strong out the gate decks that kind of spread out what a good deck could be, in that one of the best decks a format ago, which is still really strong, is Leonord, and that deck still wins now. It's still a really solid choice, I think, especially with the stuff it got in, you know, set 4. And there's a lot of decks like that, and more decks coming out of set 7 that we know are going to get support, like Youthberg, and now I guess Almagester, which is funny, but they're keeping up a really strong tradition that they started with Divines, where there was no deck left behind. Like any deck got support. Like a Eugene, Flagberg got something. Yeah, Flagberg got a triple rare in set 2, I think. Like they've hit almost every deck in the game that I think is like worth giving support to. You know, I think nothing hits that point home more than Trey and I opening packs for any new set and be like, dude, there's a Petrolka card in here? Wait, there's an Ellen Glemma card in here? That's crazy. What they're giving... There's a Spino Marquee card in here? That's wow. Like, they're just hitting everything. Like, they're hitting everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, we're still waiting on those ride lines for our promo bosses. Sure. We're still waiting, but I digress. That's a... Hey, Bushy, box toppers. Ride lines from promo bosses. There you go. There's your out.
Or like, you can follow up with your idea of printing these old generic cards back into these newer sets, like with the grade 3 dragons, and you can pad out your sets any way you want, Bushi. Just if you want to pad out your commons and rares, make ride lines for the promo bosses. Like, it wouldn't be that hard, you know.
We're waiting. That's all I'm saying. We're waiting. We love our little pet decks.
Yeah, like if you're gonna pad out a set with a bunch of anti-G zone stuff, which is fine. The design space is there, and I think I'm glad you guys explored it. But you know, there's other things you could explore. Your little, like, Shield Fisher. I don't know. That's a weird one, but he doesn't have his own thing. But I don't know if he really needs one, because at least he's doing something like adjacent to something else.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, that's one of those kind of middle ground, weird empty spaces. But
yeah,
they've done good. Just to kind of hop back onto the train of one other little negative thing I think they've started doing, and it's been more recently than, you know, the latter half of the year than most of the year, is they've started to limit a lot of tournaments and things to like one shop or 50 shops total type thing across the United States, which sounds like a lot, but there's 50 states, so you're saying roughly there's one in every state, which a lot of the states are too big to, you know, travel. Like Texas is huge, California's huge. Like there are a lot of things. Like we have 3 shops viably that we can get to within an hour that play Cardfight Vanguard in our area. And like one of the new sets that has like a mat and a critical trigger or something is not in one of our shops here, which is like unfortunate. You know, their whole thing is wanting to get everyone involved and giving everyone a chance to play the game by the start decks, reprints of, you know, the glitter units, all these things throughout the year. But then they start excluding things from specific things. And like, I get there's part of that, like, if everyone gets it, then no one really like has it like well type thing. Like, it, it's a tough one because, you know, some people get that exclusivity of, okay, well, my shop had it and I'm close, or hey, I traveled 3 hours to get to this card shop to try for this mat, like, and you win it. You know, that's a really cool thing. That's something you have that like not very many people have. Only 50 people in the state have. But at the same time, like, you're not giving everyone a fair chance at it. And I know that there are shops that are smaller that don't have but 4 players. You know, and still it feels kind of wrong to exclude those players from that same ability to get it. So it's not, you know, anything like horrible. It's not the end of the world type thing, but I think it can be frustrating to some players. Like we have one guy at our shop who complained about that multiple times over the last little bit, about especially one of the play mats that's coming up, that we don't have the ability to get it. So it is what it is. Just a little unfortunate, I think.
Yeah, it's not something I have like super strong opinions about out of anything that's been happening lately, but it is kind of strange that, like, you know, like there's only so many stores in America that carry and are official like Cardfight Vanguard stores that you can find on like the Bushinevi app. I don't think there's enough of them that limiting the amount of special events you hold to certain shops is really like gonna do anything for anybody. Like, what does it do to limit something like that for an event that happens on one day out of the year? Like, you're gonna, like, what, you really can't print enough like special energy cards, or, you know, you're still only making so many playmats. You know, you don't have to bust out a ton of those, but as far as for the people who like to come by at their locals for those special events just to get the energy card. Like, I know that something I like to do now is I want to get to a point to where all of my energy cards are different, and I want to kind of look through it as I'm playing a game and being like, oh yeah, you know, I got this one at this Vanguard day, and I got this one at this Vanguard day, and they're nice to see as well because they kind of remind people that an anime exists, you know, with like that Anime to Life showdown they had last year, which was kind of cute. I like the idea of it. I kind of hope they do more of that, especially with the tournament arc coming up. There's a lot of decks in there that could actually, you know, make for an interesting format. But I think all in all, it is something I do agree with. I think it's very strange to limit it to that degree. We're not Japan, you know. You can't take a 5-hour train that runs through the whole country to a certain province and be able to play that tournament, and then the next day go to a different, you know, province or prefecture and play in this tournament. Like, that's just not a thing in like any country besides Japan, which I think can kind of, you know, it'll circle around to maybe a lot of things that we complain about. Is there's a lot of things about the game that I think is pretty, you know, like oriental minded. There's a lot of things that just don't make sense as far as like promos go. Like, the way promos are distributed is scarce for no reason, you know. But I think that's kind of on purpose, and like, we know that promos are not supposed to be as widely available as other things, but it's never felt this weird as much as it did in like V. Like, V was the beginning of this, where promos were very hard to get for some reason, and you kind of needed them. But
yeah, and you know, obviously there's something, it's an incentive to go to the shops. But when some of the shops that you go to don't have the event, you know, it's like, why would I go to this event to just play the normal weekly one when I could be playing in the big one for the playmat and the you know, energy card? And yeah, it's very nitpicky on my end, and it's nothing awful in reality. It's just one of those things that, you know, if we're gonna talk about, yeah, it leaves a bad taste. And if we're gonna talk about the good things, we have to talk about the bad things. For sure. Because the game's not perfect. We're not perfect. You know, nothing is. So, you know, we just roll with it, what we got. So, but putting the thoughts out there and the discussion out there, so to hear your guys' opinion and our opinion, you know, it's all needed, I think. So.
Yeah, to bounce back to the positive side of events, though, which there is one really, really, really big one that I think single-handedly puts us above other card games, is our prizing is really good right now. Like, as far as like our regional tournaments go, those energy markers or those energy generators, and you know, those cool energy cards that you can get from like side tournaments, and those fancier ones that you can find just from like doing well, the amount of things that you can walk home with from a tournament, from a big regional tournament, is so much better than in like other card games. It's like it kind of sits up right next to like One Piece, where you have a lot of good promotional cards from tournaments that kind of cover your commute and your hotel and stuff like that, which is really important for the competitive part of a game, that people who play it at a very high level feel like it's worth doing, and that the monetary aspect of it, because those cards are really nice. Like the energy generators with like anime characters on it that people really like, and having that nice foiling, like the really good colors they put on there, like they really hit a home run with that, and it keeps the competitive side of the game like really healthy. And it, as much as it will never truly justify the cost of certain cards, it does in a way, it does straight up make the price of some of these decks worthwhile, because you should never look at a card game like this. I'll preface this, especially if you're a casual player who's never going to go to a tournament. This is not how you should look at a game, and you should want it to be cheaper anyway. But when you think about how you build a deck for like $200 even, and you're well off enough that outside of what you can spend on card games, you also are able to travel pretty well, and you're in a good area, a good part of the country, and you can go to these regional tournaments and make some pretty good money off of these prize cards. You know, how much you put into the deck to get what you got out is better than you can say in a lot of other card games.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we're people who collect shiny cardboard. We love it, and that's the best part. So our prizing being energy cards, I think, is actually like the best thing the game can have, because you essentially have the ability to have 10 trophy stands on your board during the game that you can show off and flex and enjoy and love while playing your favorite deck. Like, it was great. They used to do like special gilded cards. Like, I have one from when I run a Spring Fest, and it's a really crappy Dragon Empire grade 1, which, as a Dragon Empire, I was happy I got it. It's got the great foiling. It's a really cool card. Like, it looks good. It's a great binder piece, but awful card that will never go in a deck. So is what it is. But having the energies there is great, because playmats are so hit or miss. Like, people like having their own art and their own displays, sometimes their own logos, things like that. So yes, having the mats is fun, and they look great in videos and all sorts of other things, deck list, awesome. Great even wall pieces sometimes if you want. But at the same time, the energy cards are like the perfect outcome of that, because we get to do exactly that. We get to show them off and be like, oh yeah, I took, top 16 in this tournament, and you have the card to prove it, or, so on and so forth, whatever it is. But it's just real nice that as collectors of cardboard, we get to show it off in a really cool way.
Yeah, playable cosmetic prize is something that Vanguard has had before. We've had certain imaginary gift markers. We had certain ones of those that you could only get at certain tournaments, and they were really nice, and it gave a lot of value to something that not everybody needed or really wanted, and you could easily justify your tournament runs with cards like those. And now we're back into that, and it's even stronger than ever. Like, having the thing you need to play the game right now, having now on it, and it's a really crisp, like, red with that foiling that is like on no other card. Like, that, like, writing your grade 1 and flipping that over is like so powerful, like, that can't be replicated by anything. And right now it's like one of the most sought after like tournament pieces that you can get, as well as those energy cards that have the nation symbol on them. And I believe there are some special ones that are like the Nation King cards. Those are I love those. I've always loved the idea of those, because back in G they had the clan leader cards that you could only get if you played in side tournaments where everybody was only playing that clan, and you had to be the best player of that clan to get them. Like, you can see them now, back people trying to move them, because they still have quite a big price tag on them. Like, some of them are like $120 or like $80 depending on the clan it was. But I love that they're still kind of keeping up with that, of being like, oh, you're really good at this nation and you have this card to prove it.
Yep. But fantastic, you know. What can we say? I mean, we do things right. Bushy does a lot of things right, and we're really excited and happy with how things have gone in 2024. We're very excited to be back for 2025 and look forward to what's coming up. So, yeah, I can't wait to add some more content to the channel. You know, we have a couple things lined up that we're going to be doing. Maybe some more quizzes, some fight videos, a couple other things, and maybe some other card games too if we are feeling a little spicy here. We'll see.
Yeah, I think this part of the year is always kind of my favorite when it comes to Vanguard. The product stream coming out, I believe it's like next week. It's like next week or the week after. The first one of the year is always my favorite. It sets the tone for the whole year, because they give you the most far ahead of what's coming up. Like, it's this time of the year where we're gonna see like what we're getting as far as like a festival booster or like a reprint set in general. You know, this last year, I think it was like right around like the first week of January, we got the product stream that showed us like Triple Drive, and you know, Divines I think was like not shown yet, but it was like teased heavily what we were going into, and it was such an exciting time that I'm glad to be back into that, and to be able to talk about it. I think it's been very fun to kind of discuss this game on this podcast as much as we have. It's kind of helped me put my own opinions into perspective, especially when I see your guys' comments. There's been a couple of you guys who kind of write books, and we enjoy reading them quite a bit.
Yeah, and that's one thing we're going to be better about. We want to be more interactive with you all and post more updates and things. So we're going to continue to grow the channel as the year goes. I mean, obviously we're still fairly new at this, for what it is. I mean, but we're very excited. This time of year, great, super early in the year. This year's going to go by so quick, but it's going to be exciting.
Yep. So for now, that's going to be it. There was some other things I do want to talk about, but I think this has gone on long enough, and I think it would kind of lead us in suspense for what Set 7 is bringing us, because that's what we were thinking about talking about, but now that I think about it, I think it would be more exciting to kind of have a general discussion about Set 7, given it's going to be the beginning of the new anime season. There's going to be a lot of new stuff in that. The most out of probably for the year, if not one of the most, depending on how, you know, season 4 of Divines goes. Wow, we're already kind of deep into it. Yeah. But for now, yeah, if you like this kind of stuff and you've only joined us for our recent episodes, we've got a big backlog that you can look at and see if anything is helpful for you. So be sure to subscribe for what we got coming up for the rest of the year. And tell us what you liked about this year, because there's a lot, I think, that while it was good or bad, nothing, in my opinion, was like unequivocally good or bad. Like there are parts that we've mentioned already about last year that you could argue is a bad thing, depending on how I've kind of defended the prices of some generics, which puts me in a weird spot, but I still think it is worth having that opinion. So until the next one, I was Cole.
And I was Trey.
And we'll see you in the next one.